Imagine, if you will, that you have a friend who is a world-renowned woodworker. And because he's your friend, because he cares deeply about you, he gives you a gift in the form of a coffee table. And as you look at the table, you can see that it was very clearly put together in a loving way, that it was carefully crafted so that it would last you a long time. So, wanting to care for this gift that you received from a friend, you place this coffee table in your living room. You even go so far that when people come over to visit, you tell them, please, no feet on the table. It was a gift from a friend, and if you have a drink, please use a coaster so you don't leave any rings on the wood. In addition to this, the coffee table being in your living room is in a climate-controlled environment. It's never too hot or too cold. It doesn't get rained on. It's far enough from a window that it doesn't get touched by the sun. Under these conditions, we would expect this coffee table to last a long time. Possibly even your entire life, with a very minimal amount of extra care on your part. No tightening of the screws, no repainting of the wood. Life is easy for this table, so it just doesn't require much of anything. But what would happen if instead you took that exact same coffee table made by that exact same world-renowned woodworker and you placed it outside in your backyard? Now, I'm not saying it would fall apart that day or even that week, but over time the coffee table would change. Its color would fade as a result of it being beat upon by the sun and pounded by the rain. Maybe it would get some scratches in it when it was flipped over by the wind. The screws might start to loosen as it experiences the freeze and thaw cycles of the winter. Because the coffee table is outside and not in your living room, it will always be in a state where it's either breaking or completely broken. Not because it wasn't well made, not because you don't care about it, just it's in a position where it's constantly exposed to the elements. Thus, if you want the coffee table to last a long time, you must engage in a maintenance program. Maybe you stain it once a year to protect it from the rain and the snow. Maybe you elevate it off the ground slightly to protect it from the freeze and thaw cycles of the seasons. Maybe you keep it outside, but you place it under a tree so it experiences some shade for at least part of the day. By doing these things, by engaging in this daily maintenance program, the coffee table, even though it's outside, even though it's exposed to the elements, all the vicissitudes of life, we would still expect it to last a long time, maybe even your entire life. More so, I would say that what I've described in terms of caring for the coffee table probably doesn't seem that strange to most of you. You might even say it's common sense. Here's the question. If we have this understanding when it comes to furniture, why don't we have that same understanding when it comes to our mind? You see, here in the West, we've bought into the myth of eternalism, something that Buddha argued against 2,600 years ago. And this myth dictates that if something is good, then it should be pure enough of its essence that it is unchanging, it is unaffected by the world around it. It is the same today, tomorrow, 10 years from now. It's eternal. However, as Buddhists, we understand that everything in life, be it coffee tables, be it greenhouses, be it kitty cats, everything is interconnected and interpenetrated with everything else in the universe. Thus, in the same way that the world around us is always changing, our minds also change. Sometimes the sun rises, sometimes we feel happy. Sometimes leaves fall from the trees, sometimes we feel sad. Sometimes there's ice on the ground, sometimes we're depressed. Sometimes there's strong winds. Sometimes our minds are filled with joy and ecstasy. They change just like the seasons. They are affected because they are constantly exposed to the elements, in the same way that the coffee table in our thought experiment was always exposed to the elements. Our minds, thus, are always in a state where they are breaking or they're broken. So we must always be in the state of continuing a maintenance program. Not because we're flawed, not because we're broken in any way, but in the same way that a well-made coffee table still needs to be cared for, our minds, wonderful though they are, still need to be cared for. And when we approach life in this way, a couple of things happen. First, we give ourselves a bit of grace. We understand that just because we're having a bad day, that doesn't make us a bad person. That just because we make mistakes, it doesn't mean we can't fix them. It also means that we approach our minds with a bit of curiosity. Instead of being frustrated by our anger, our fear, our anxiety, we look at the situation and ask, well, where did this emotion come from? And then once we track down where the emotion came from, we can decide what's the appropriate action to take in order to correct our minds. In the same way that if we look at the coffee table and it looks a bit weather-beaten, we may decide, it's time to put on another coat of paint. By understanding our minds are always breaking, by understanding that we must always engage in a maintenance program, we position ourselves where our minds are in a position that they can continue with us for our entire lives. Which is good, because they will, whether we take care of them or not. But the quality of our minds will be better. This is why we always say that Buddhism is a lifetime practice. We don't engage in the training with the idea that, well, if I get really good at meditation, eventually I won't need it anymore. If I study enough sutras, eventually I'll learn enough where my mind will never experience anger. That's silly. It's like saying if I do a good enough job painting this coffee table, I'll never have to paint it again. The same common sense we approach our furniture with should be the sense we approach our minds with. And by understanding that our minds are constantly changing, we understand that we must be willing to change with them, willing to engage in the programs that are necessary, the meditation, the prostrations, the sutra study, etc., abiding by the Four Noble Truths and the Noble Eightfold Path, not because we're broken and need to be fixed, but because we're wonderfully made. Because we appreciate the rare and wonderful gift of this human life, this one chance to realize enlightenment. And in the same way that we would care for the gift of a coffee table from a world-renowned woodworker, understanding that our life is also a gift, that our mind, strange though it may be, is also a gift. we not only care for it, but we enjoy the process. We enjoy the fact that we can do something to end suffering, not just for ourselves, but for all sentient beings. Amitabha.